I come from a matrilineal society, and having women be a source of power was there in my DNA. My father was Swedish. My mother was Cherokee from North Carolina. And so most of my growing up, I'd be going back to my grandmother and grandfathers every summer. And I began seeing such a difference between my cousins and myself. They knew how to catch the crayfish, they knew where the fox dens were, but they couldn't read a ruler, couldn't do fractions. I knew that something was wrong because my cousins were smart. The first thing the principal told me when I walked into Hammond was they had been open since 1943 and never graduated an Indian student. And then they took me on a tour of the school. And all of the Indian kids had this white adhesive, the surgical tape, over their mouth. And I just stopped cold. And I go up to the teacher and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, everyone knows Indians are savages." She said, "They disrupt the class. Is it any wonder that these kids were dropping out?" So I pulled every one of those kids out of school and we started our own Indian school. We had redneck ranchers driving by in their pickup shooting their rifles at it over the top of the schoolhouse, and to really watch the kids to make sure that everybody was safe. That's just one story of the whole school movement, though. It was an amazing, amazing time. Most of the people involved in the Indian Control School movement had never been off the reservation. We weren't talking about leaders in a theoretical sense. We were talking about parents that couldn't take it any longer. This was the civil rights movement for Indian people. It was the most profound piece of legislation since the 1930s. It wasn't just the schools. Any governmental service that was going to impact tribal people in the United States, they had the legal right to control it and run it themselves. And self-determination has become the rallying call for Indigenous peoples globally. None of our borrowers came in and say, "I want to have money, I want to have my own business." Every one of our borrowers came in and said, "Well, my community needs." It was a fascinating understanding of Indigenous cultures looking at it from a point of what's the collective good and what's needed in the community, but also very smart entrepreneurism, too. We're having to really push the boundaries. We take grant applications by YouTube because we're looking at non-literate cultures and communities. And what we're seeing come out of there is fundamental understandings around the role of women, traditional ecological knowledge, bringing values into a society that had been afraid of values. We hope and believe that Indigenous people's role will be able to fundamentally change the business model as we know it.